a writer of fiction. I'm working on a novel, Universal Justice, and I've finished it. But what I'm going to read to you is a short story or an excerpt from a short story that I wrote about 3 years ago. It's called Where the Heart Is. It's a story that I had written for a contest, and I never finished it. So I'm going to read to you an excerpt from Where the Heart Is. After 30 years, the things that had come to define her life were all gone. Her husband, her house, and soon her children. They stood outside the Living Oaks Senior Living Community, a majestic antebellum home and former plantation, much like the one she had grown up in, that had been transformed into an old folks' home. Sure, they called it a senior living community, but Naomi Whitfield knew the truth. She was about to be abandoned by her children. The son and daughter that she had dedicated her life to were about to dump her here in this place they kept referring to as her new home, drive away, and probably never be seen by her again. She hardly ever saw them as it was, with Sarah living in Maryland and Buster in Atlanta with a job that took so much of his time. "What do you think, Mama?" Buster said, nodding his head and grinning from ear to ear. She wanted to slap him. He looked like his father standing there with that stupid grin on his face. She had often thought about slapping Franklin over the course of their 30-year marriage. God knows he'd slapped her around enough. Not that it would have done any good. Franklin Whitfield was a man who had lived in his own world, one where he was the star and all others were just supporting casts with no importance other than how they related to him. That included his family. Not wanting to be outdone and always wanting to have the last word, Sarah pitched in with her unsolicited opinion. "You're going to love it here, Mama. I read all up about this place, and it is where many of North Carolina's high society choose to retire. You'll be in good company." Naomi stared at her daughter as she spoke, wanting to place her hands over her ears to drown out that irritating voice, a voice that was at least 2 octaves higher than it should be. Where in the world had she picked up that awful habit? She didn't have it before she went off to college in Virginia. Undoubtedly, someone who she considered to be high society had impressed upon her the idea that this is how women of good breeding were supposed to talk. Naomi was sure that whoever it was had gotten a good laugh out of the outcome. She looked at both her children as they each held their breath, their blinking eyes looking at her with expressions of expectation. Naomi gave a faint smile and a slight nod of her head as she uttered the response for which they were waiting. "It's lovely," she replied softly in the sweetest Southern Belle rendition she could employ. She could hear the exhale that came in unison as each one's expression softened and their shoulders relaxed. Buster and Sarah were not twins. In fact, at the age of 28, Buster was 4 years older than Sarah, though you couldn't tell by looking at them. They both had their mother's dark blue eyes framed beneath their father's thick dark hair. And at 5 feet 6 inches, Sarah was only an inch shorter than her brother. There was nothing exceptional about either of them. Neither were extraordinary, with no distinguishing features except for the small scar above Buster's right eye. Naomi stepped in closer to her son and slowly raised her hand, knowing what came next. Buster bent down and allowed his mother to caress the scar on his brow as she had done many times since he was 2 years old. She closed her eyes, shuddering at the painful memory of the 2-year-old boy taking the brunt of a blow meant for her. Buster took his mother's hand. "Shall we go inside?" he asked as he placed his mother's hand on his arm and turned toward the grand entrance to the building. "They're expecting us." Sarah sprang to her mother's other side and grabbed her arm. "Yes, by all means," she chimed in with a smile. "Let's go. Let's not keep high society waiting." Naomi allowed herself to be propelled forward, unable to avoid the dreaded feeling of being led to the gallows. Once again following suit and allowing someone else to dictate the course of her life. After ascending the 5 steps that led to a long wraparound porch, complete with 4 large wooden rocking chairs, they stopped in front of a set of huge oak wood double doors. In lieu of a doorbell, there hung a thick golden cord at the right of the doors. Naomi looked up at her son standing to her right. He looked down at her and smiled warmly. She could hear the sound of her heart as it pounded against her chest. She quickly turned away and looked at her daughter standing to her left. Sarah did not look at her mother, but Naomi could sense a sadness there. She stared straight ahead. The fake smile that she wore like a garment was temporarily gone. Naomi tried to imagine what her daughter was like when she was alone and no one was watching. Did she feel the need to hide behind her happy facade, or was that just for the benefit of everyone else? "Well," Buster's voice invaded her thoughts. "Here we go," he said as he pulled on the cord. She watched as Sarah snapped into character, as though a director had yelled, "Action!" "Just think, Mama," she said with her familiar smile, "on the other side of that door is your new home." The end.